Hello there and welcome to Tom's Warhammer Minis. Today we are venturing to Craftworld Iyanden and painting up the exclusive Warhammer Plus Infinity's Lament diorama piece. Spirit Seers are vital on the battlefield, but they have an equally important role to play when the fight is long over, and that is ushering the souls of the fallen Wraithbone constructs back to the Infinity Circuit aboard their Craftworld. This model is my free choice this year, and it is an absolute fantastic sculpt from Games Workshop and an absolute joy to bring to life. Now, as a thank you to all the recent subscribers on this channel, I have brought this model to life so that you too can paint it up in this colour scheme, or use the colour scheme to paint your own Craftworld Iyanden models. Now, there are armies out there that aren't quite our cup of tea. Aeldari is that aspect for me personally. With complex highlights to apply, they're very easy to paint, but extremely challenging to look good. Having not really painted them, let alone this colour scheme, it has been a fantastic challenge plotting and planning the right colours to bring this really awesome model to life. And I'm sure you agree, the end result is absolutely phenomenal. So without further ado, grab your paints, grab your brushes, and let's get hobbying. And let's get started with this absolutely fantastic 40k exclusive Warhammer Plus model, Infinity's Lament. We've got the spirits here, we've got the wraith that it's standing on. Now, just to note, I've primed the model in White Scar, and as you can see, I built it in its entirety. You can keep the spirits here separate, but for me, I like to have things all built completely. Now, I primed it in White Scar because we've got some very bold, bright colours. I'm copying the box art, we're doing Craftworld Iyanden, so there's going to be bright blues, bright yellows, but there's also a lot of black details. And the reason I'm doing black first is because if I make mistakes, I can easily fix them in White Scar rather than spoiling the yellow details or the blue details, which would be a lot harder to fix. It's the one downside to contrast painting, but we can do black first and work it in our favour. Now, the colour I'm using here is Black Templar. Quite surprisingly, I've studied the images hard. There's quite a lot of black details here, more than you can actually appreciate until you really study the images. So I'm going to go through all the details just to note. Now, I know they're not soft seal armour like Space Marines, but they essentially look the same, so I'll be comparing it like that when I explain it. But to begin with, you've got the main pole of the staff, that's painted in Black Templar. If I go to the neck, you have got the soft seal of the neck armour here. Look behind, you've got this, not soft seal, but you've got this patterned area that's painted in black on the box art. Then you've got this kind of backpack section, and you've got the soft seal there. Turn him round, and you've got the handle of the blaster that is painted in black. And then, just hard to see, but where you've got his foot here, you've got these two little attachments just at the back there, which are also painted in Black Templar. Moving on to the wraith, you've got this big chunk of section here, which is also on the other side here. You've got these smaller sections here, there's two of them, which you go round, and there's one that's just slightly under the foot. On the same side of this one, you can see there's one just down in there. You've then got the actual helmet of this wraith, and it's the inside here, so we've got both sides. You've got the soft seal joint that's connecting it all the way down. You can see it goes all the way down to the very bottom. Same on this side, all the way down there. Now this section of the shoulder here, I don't know if it's black or not, but when you look at the box art image, it's extremely dark inside where they've done the camera, so I've painted it on the inside there. You've got a bit of soft seal section there. There's a bit of soft seal section here in part of the rubble. Then you've got this section here, you've got this symbol of the craft world. I've painted the entire thing in black. It goes all the way round under the foot there. Don't worry about catching the actual icon because that's going to be painted in gold later. And you've got all the internal workings of the wraith that's become rubble and destroyed. This is all painted black. So you've got a section here under the foot going to just there. And if you turn it round, you've got this section here of the inside of the wraith. And then you've got this section here, the inside of the wraith too. So there's a lot of details to cover. We're doing it now. If you make a mistake, I caught a couple of areas just here. Just fix it with White Scar. And as is the way of recording the tutorial, you always miss one last bit which you haven't painted. The last bit of Black Templar is the soft seal section just on top of the helmet here. With that, the Black Templar is officially done. Next up, we're base coating all of our yellow details, and I really recommend using the box art imagery as guides. And on the actual website, we've got a proper 360, which is really useful here. But this is all the yellow details, including the armor as well as the cloak. And the color I'm using here is Bad Moon's Yellow, and I have thinned this down in a 1-to-1 mix with Lamy Medium. Now, technically, it doesn't need this. It is going to help with the flow, but I've used it for a slightly different reason. The colour is going to be bright and vivid. When you look at the box art and the actual colour scheme of Clan Iyanden, it's a bit difficult to get shading in. Shading is going to generally take the yellow and make it a lot darker when it's meant to be bright and vivid. So by creating this thinner mix, I'm going to be using different yellows in the next couple of stages to really get some proper shading in, still leaving the lighter edge highlight in place, which we can add to at the end, but it means we can control the colour of the yellow to get it more precise to the colour scheme rather than accidentally spoiling it. I recommend using a small layer brush here. There are a lot of details we don't want to catch the white. You've got this natural white trim of the cloak, and naturally we don't want to catch any of the details that are going to be blue, and this is essential in contrast painting. If you do catch an area with blue, or where the blue is going to be, do fix it with white scar, because if you paint the blue over that, it's going to turn green. Blue and yellow mixed together turn green, and that's how contrast paints work. They're thin ink-like things, they will stain, they do overlap each other, and they will change the colour. So be sure any blue areas are fixed with white scar if you do catch them, but use a small airbrush and just take your time. Take it section by section. Do check for pooling. I've got a little bit of pooling here, but I'm going to turn that into my advantage later, because that's where I'm going to apply some of the shading, because I'm going to do two different yellows, one for the cloak, one for the armour. But that's the colour we're using, Bad Moon's Yellow, for bright vividness in a 1-to-1 mix with Lamy Medium. Next up, it's time to shade our yellow details. Now, when you look at the box art, it's pretty much one overall yellow colour, which does look good, but I kind of want to distinguish the two different types of yellow that we can make here. We've got all of the armour, and I'm including the spirits here and the wraith. That is armour, it's going to be made of a different material. My second yellow that I want to focus on is the cloak. To me, the cloak and the armour we see of the Aeldari, they're going to be two different materials, and I kind of want to distinguish that, but keep them so very similar. It's a subtle difference that you really see it when you really look. You can probably just about notice it as you look. So let's focus on the cloak to begin with, and I'm taking Iyanden yellow. Now ignore what the pot says, this is true Iyanden yellow. And I've created it in a roughly 3 to 4 part Lamy and Medium mix. So we're talking 3 to 4 parts of Lamy Medium, 1 part of Iyanden Yellow, so it's very, very thin. Now Iyanden Yellow, when it goes into the recesses, it is quite vivid, it is quite strong, and it is very orange. So I really want to control the amount that's on my brush, but essentially I'm just using this to do a layer over the entirety of all the cloak. Control where the orange goes as it gets into the recess. I don't want it too heavy. Now you can't really see it here, but when I did apply it, it was very strong, very vivid, and I've just moved the paint around until I get to this kind of consistency. So that's for the cloak. Once that's dry, I'm moving on to all the other details. So this is the wraith armour, and this is the spirit seer armour. The colour I'm using here is Imperial Fist. Now once again, I'm filling this down, I don't want it too strong. So I've created a roughly 3 to 4 Lamy Medium mix with that. So 3 to 4 parts Lamy Medium, 1 part Imperial Fist. And this is over the entirety of all of the armour of the wraith and the armour of the spirit seer. Once again, I'm obviously want it to go into the recesses to create this natural yellowing shade. I don't want it too heavy when you're applying it with the brush, because you don't want it to pull heavily in certain areas. So just keep an eye on it, take your time, and do it section by section. You'll end up with something pretty much like this. And next up, it's time to base coat all of our blue colours. And as you can probably tell, and if you are very good at observing, it's the completely wrong blue. And that is absolutely intentional. If you've seen my other videos, you know exactly what I'm about to say. Contrast paints work really well if you put an underlayer on to begin with. I want that rich, vibrant Iyanden blue that you see. Now to achieve that, we need an underlayer, because the darker blues that Games Workshop creates as contrast paints, they're great. They're absolutely great colours, but they won't achieve the effect that we want unless we got a blue underlayer like this. Remember, contrast painting, we're working from light to dark rather than traditional painting, which is dark to light. So the colour I'm using here is Frost Heart, and I thin this down in a 1-to-1 mix with Lamy Medium. And I've got two reasons for that. First of all, I want this bright vivid blue. This blue is going to be the edge highlight colour that we see on the actual model. Now, if we're very careful, and I'm going to try and showcase this in the next few steps, we can potentially paint the darker blues and not have to do any edge highlighting. And if we do achieve that, this is the blue colour we want. Secondly, the Lamy Medium is going to really help with the flow. The 1-to-1 mix, you've got these large panels here. Now, you are going to expect little areas, just see about here where it's slightly darker, it is going to pull ever so slightly. It is hard to achieve large flat areas. So what we want to do is start at the top, work your way down, do the other side, start at the top, work your way down, do the other side. Remember, gravity is going to pull the paint. We want to make sure that we move the paint around. So where you start to see it pull, sort of dry brush, wipe it off the excess and bring the excess paint maybe around here, bring it around to this bit. So we've got this flat, even colour. It really is a case of practice and taking your time. Now, if you do get areas that pull, don't worry too much, because when we apply the darker blues, it's not going to be as noticeable. And if you get areas like this and it starts to pull around here, well, we're going to use that to our advantage anyway, because don't forget, we want to create shadows as well. So it's Frost Heart and Lamy Medium in a 1-to-1 mix. Take your time and base coat all the blue details. One further point, I mentioned it with the yellow, I'm now going to mention it with the blue. We do not want to get this paint on the yellow details. If you do, wash your brush, and while it's damp, move the paint off, because if it dries and settles, it's going to turn green, and we don't want that to happen. Next up, while that Frost Heart blue is drying, I've taken advantage of doing some other details, and I'm working on the soil as well as some of the leather details, and the colour I'm using here is Sigil Brown. Now, I really would recommend using a small layer brush, especially working around all these areas here. So these are all the rocks, which I'm going to be painting in grey later on. So we really want just to be catching the details around them, and a small layer brush works really well. It's also important when we get to other details like this. So you've got the rope that's hanging this medallion, which I've painted in Sigil Brown. Obviously be careful as you get towards the yellow, we don't want to spoil that. I've painted a little rope here, because you've got two little medallions there. And then you've got the gun holster and this little bag here, which just extends upwards as a little belt into the sash around his waist. And again, a small airbrush is exactly what you need just to get into those details without catching the others. It just makes sense to get this all painted now. So you take your time when you get around here. It's a little bit tricky. It's completely doable. It just requires patience. So we get that done, and then we can move on to doing a bit more of the blue detailing. And next up, I'm taking Assaman Blue, and this is going to be the real prime colour that you see across this model. Now, it's a bit darker than the box art, but I've gone with this method because it really helps to contrast against that real bright, vivid yellow. It just really makes it stand out more. Now, you could use less of the mix I'm about to tell you about to try and make it a bit weaker, but that's down to you. I like this bright vividness. It's how I like to paint. So with Assaman Blue, I'm taking roughly 4 parts of this and 1 part of Lamy Medium. Now, there's a specific reason to this kind of ratio. It doesn't thin down the colour of any contrast paint. The 1 part to 4 parts helps to thin the paint down in the terms of flowing. So when you've got large areas like this, if you've ever done contrast paints over flat areas, people say it doesn't work. It does. You've just got to be able to control the flow of paint. And this 1 to 4 ratio is how it really helps here, by keeping the default colour of the paint but helping with the flow. Now, as you can see, I've avoided all of the edge highlights. It means they're all done and in place for us. But there are a few little tricks just to be aware of. So when you get to these, I call them gems. They're not gems, but for all intents and purposes, you know what I mean. Just a small amount in the centre, leaving the entire outside edge with the highlights. Same like when you get to these sections here on top of the spines. Now, the spines themselves are a bit tricky. When you look at the heavy metal box art, and this is the same across all Aeldari models, they have these highlights in place. You've got side here as an example, but it's a curved piece. There is no actual edge to highlight, which makes it a bit tricky to do. So what I've done here is I've taken the paint, starting at the top, and I've drawn a straight line down, leaving each side in the frost heart. Now these sides weren't painted at the time, and then on this side I'm sort of drawing up to the edge and creating this line, so to speak. It's not an actual edge, but it's the curved edge, if you like. It's a bit tricky. Do that first, just take your time. There's a lot of work to do here, but if you take your time, you're rewarding yourself at the end with not having to do any edge highlighting. As you can see, it's very bright, it's very vivid, it stands out really nicely. So take your time, get that all done, and we can move on to the next stage. Next up, I'm enriching all those blue details one last time, and this is going to finish off all the blue for the end. So the colour I'm using here is Tyrant Blue. This is a shade paint and it is very unique. It has very limited uses, I find, but where it has its uses, they are exceptional. Now this takes the blue that we had originally. It's not going to alter it, it's just going to enrich it. It's going to really provide more saturation and depth. It just really gives an overall awesome vibe. So I've painted it very thinly over all the details. Now be wary of this paint, and I have made an article on this on my Instagram page, so do check it out, just to give you an idea of how good this paint is and how it has its uses. If you apply it too thickly, it will clog. This is just one of the facts of this paint. So make sure you've got an even layer spread all over. Don't worry about going over the frost heart. I've done that because it enriches the frost heart colour as well. When it comes to the actual mask, I've painted it all over, and instantly I washed the brush and I feathered it out, so we've got the more white area of the white sky in the centre, and you can see we've just got this natural blend of the Tyrant Blue focusing in towards the recesses, which completes the mask. So just take your time, get all that done, and it just really enhances the blue. At the same time, I've also added some sterling mud to the base. There's not a lot to do in that sense. You've just got the little tiny front bit here, and you've got more of an open area here and here, but it just keeps it in line with the mud of the Sigil brown that we painted earlier. Next up, I'm base coating all of the rocks that are dotted around the base, and the colour I'm using here is Basilicanum Grey. I don't want to overload the brush because otherwise it gets very dark and heavy. You just have a small amount on the tip of your brush and just neatly apply it on all of the rocks. Moving on from that, once the sterling mud is dry, I've shaded it entirely with Agrax Earthshade. This will just darken it down more to look a bit more in line with the Sigil brown. I don't want to use Sigil brown over it, because that would be too dark, in the sense that this was painted over white scar and we're painting this over a dark colour, so Agrax Earthshade works really well. Now while we've got the Agrax Earthshade, I've taken a small amount on a very old battered brush. I've rinsed most of it off onto a paper towel, so you just got a little bit on there, and I've just very gently stippled it all over the actual Wraith construct. And this is because it's broken, it's crashed in the soil, and I kind of want to distinguish the yellow from the spirits here. So by just dirtying it down, just a little stippling of Agrax Earthshade all over, it shows it's been battered, it's destroyed. We've now got a distinction between the actual spirits here and the Wraith construct. It's your choice, but by just putting a little bit on the brush, getting most of it off on a paper towel, and then just gently stippling it on, we create this random effect. Rather than shading the model, we're just dirtying it and making it more grungy. It's an optional choice, but I'd recommend it. It just helps to have that subtle distinction between the two characters. Moving on from that, we need to shade our white details. I'm not including the mask. We've got that Tyrant Blue in place, and that's enough for what we need there. The colour I'm using next is Apothecary White. This is for all the other white details. So you've got these little ropes and bandages that are kind of coming down. These purity seals aren't quite purity seals, and then you've got the inside of the cloak. Control the amount on your brush here. You don't want it to pull excessively, but you want it just to pull enough to create a bit of a shadow, especially in those cloak areas and amongst the recesses of these little wraps and bindings. Now with that done, while it's drying, we can move on to this little detail here, the inside workings of the Wraith. And the colour I'm using here is Brass Scorpion. Now I've mentioned this before, Brass Scorpion is quite a thick paint, so just have a small amount on the tip of your brush and apply it on. It does work as a base coat, but I recommend 2 thin coats here, just to really get a nice solid foundation colour that's not clogging the details. And next up, we're base coating all of our gold details, and we're going very classic here with Retributor armor. It's quite simple in that sense. There's not really much to add, but I'm just going to go through the areas just in case you miss any. And this is again using the box art as reference material. So you've got the top of the staff, the most obvious one, which is both sides. You've then got the symbols that are on his chest. You've got the two gem sort of medallions that are holding the sashes on each side of that one. On this arm, you've got some rings just before this rope, and on the bottom of the rope you've got the medallion. Now talking to the staff, right on the butt of the staff you've got this little bit of metallic detailing there, and I've painted it there too. Turning him round on his backpack, connecting the sort of sashes and ropes, you've just got a bit of metallic detailing there, which I've painted in Retributor armor. On the back here you've got the weapon holster, there's a little gem just on the top. You've got the butt of the pistol, and then on this satchel you've got a tiny little gem there too. And then the last bit to apply our gold detailing, this is where we need to be super careful because it's a bit tricky to get to on the other side, but you've got the iconography here for the Aeldari that we did in Black Templar earlier, so just take your time picking that one out. And there's just a little bit, it's a bit hard to see at this camera angle, but you can probably just see it down there. And where I got the brush through to get this was just through this gap here. Just take your time, just have a small amount of brush, just really sort of hold everything steady and just take your time. Next up, I've taken Reikland Flesh Shade. And quite simply, to begin with, I've shaded all of the gold details except two. There's no need to shade this area, it's all flat and we kind of want the brightness. We don't want to have to do too much work afterwards. And that tiny little gem that's on this little satchel is just pointless to shade. So those two haven't been shaded. Now while I've got the Reikland Flesh Shade to hand, I have very carefully, and this is optional, I have done a recessed shade of all of the armour of the spirits here. This does not include the cloak. The cloak, I want that different texture like I mentioned at the beginning. Now I don't want to catch all the details because again we've got that bright yellow in place. All that base coating is done, but I want it to stand out more. And by putting the Reikland Flesh Shade into those recesses, you can clearly see all the outlines of that armour. It doesn't take away from the yellow, it just helps to enhance it. And Reikland Flesh Shade is a good brown colour that just ties in very neatly. The recess shading that you see on the box art is more black. I kind of get it. For me, I feel this works a bit better. If you wanted to go down the more darker black route, then I'd recommend Nuln Oil. But I've used Reikland Flesh Shade, and as you can see, this is the result. Just take your time, use a small airbrush, and just have a tiny amount of Reikland Flesh Shade on the tip as you work it into the recesses all around. And next, it's time to pick out all the gems and base coat them. And the colour I'm using here is Stormhost Silver. I'm going to be contrast painting over them in the next stage, and Stormhost Silver gives that real bright, vibrant undertone that's going to work really well with metallic gemstone styles. So the gems to pick out here are this one, turning round, and you can access underneath through this gap here of a paintbrush on the other side. So you've got two gems there. Then on the chest, you've got the one in the centre, and you've got one on each side for the top of that sash. On the staff, you've got one there and one there. Turn it round, exactly mirroring it, you've got one there and one there. On the weapon holster, you've got one little one there, and then you've got two little ones there. So those are all the gems that we need to base coat in Stormhost Silver. Next up, it's time to base coat those gems. I'm using two colours here. Now when you look at the box art, one of those gems is a little bit more blue, so I've opted for a different colour. I've kept it very similar, but if it's too blue, it's just going to blend in and not really be noticeable, especially with all this blue detailing we got here. But I think it works nicely, and I'm sure you'll agree. So the first colour I'm taking is Doomfire Magenta, and this is for all of our pink gems, but Doomfire Magenta is a very strong, very dark contrast paint. So I've created a 1-to-1 mix with Lamy Medium just to sort of tone down that intensity. And you only want a small amount on the tip of your brush because it's still going to be very vivid. So the gems I'm painting this over, again, use the box art as reference to guide you. But you've got this one here, the same on the other side. Then on the chest, you've got the two that are on the sash. So the one there and the one there. Then on the staff, on both sides, you've got this one. So again, it's on the other side there. Turning round, you've got the right, looking at this angle, the right hand sided gem that's on the wrist there. So those are all done in Doomfire Magenta in a 1-to-1 mix with Lamia Medium. Now for all of our other gems, I'm painting them in pure Aeldari Emerald. Once again, just having a small amount on the tip of your brush. We don't want it too strong, and you get this nice bright effect. So we've got both sides of the staff on the top here, the centre part of the chest, the gem that's on the weapon holster, and the left-handed side one on the wrist. This is matching exactly what the box art has. And you agree that the Aeldari Emerald, it's very similar to the blue, but there's a nice tonal difference where you notice it. Now once they're all dry, just to finish them off, I've taken a small amount of Ardcoat gloss varnish and just put that over the top just to give them that nice shiny gem feel. It's nice and simple, a nice cheap and cheerful, but it just looks good. Once that's done, our model is officially at what I would call battle ready. I mean, without joking, it is battle ready. It's quite a bit further beyond that, but essentially you could just finish the base off and your model is practically done, and it looks absolutely great. But I'm not leaving there. It is a beautiful centerpiece. I'm going to add a few additional highlights to make this model truly stand out. And we're starting our highlighting, and I find personally it's going to be easier to do the base first in case I make any mistakes with this. Far easier to correct something afterwards rather than to do all this, to then do that, to then fix it again. It just feels better this way. Of course, it's your choice which order you do it in. Now the colour I'm using here is Screaming Skull, and I'm applying this as a dry brush, and I'm using a very small Citadel dry brush to do this. So this is all the soil and all the rocks, but also all the Black Templar details that we see on the base, as well as the actual yellow of the Wraith. Now, the Wraith's pretty dirty and grungy now, so the colours that I'm going to be using for this, for the spirits here, it's going to be a bright yellow. I'm going to do Dawn Yellow, but Screaming Skull's not too far off, even though Screaming Skull's cream, Dawn Yellow is a very bright yellow. They're very similar in tone. So it's just simpler just to dry brush all these details and save a lot of time. And there's a lot of edges that we can catch anyway, so it just makes sense. So all the Black Templar, all of the yellow details for the Wraith, and then the entirety of the base as well as the rocks. It just saves a lot of time, and it adds this grungy effect. Now I am going to be decorating the base later with some tufts and some other bits, so it doesn't matter, like there's a little area here that I haven't quite been able to catch. It's fine. The only areas we need to be very careful working around is all of our blue details. We do not want to catch them. Just take your time and get that done. Next up, we're focusing our highlights on the Spirit Seer itself. And the first colour I'm using here is Dawn Yellow. Now this is classic traditional edge highlighting, as well as a couple of spot highlights on the knuckles and joints. So this is all of the actual body armour, as well as the cloak. I've highlighted it in both the same colour, and it really just helps to make the Spirit Seer stand out really well. Moving on from that, once it's all done, I'm taking White Scar, and this is just to edge highlight all the white details. Now, there's not much to worry about the inside of the cloak. Really the only proper edge highlight I can see is this one here, and then you just got all the sashes and stuff, which just be very careful. You've got bits of the elbow on that side too, just a bit of classic edge highlighting just to make the details stand out really nicely. Next up, I'm doing a very subtle highlight on the black of the staff. I don't want it too bright and too vivid because otherwise it gets a bit glarish. The colour I'm using here is Dawnstone. As I say, it's very subtle, and we've got to really think now, where do we apply the highlight? Where is light going to hit? Well, for me, I don't personally know, but what I do know is if this model is on display, be it my local Warhammer store, be it my own display cabinet, you're going to be looking at the model directly this way. Therefore, the highlight I've done here is straight from the top all the way down here. It just makes sense. The other side I've left blank because A, it's angled slightly, so light's not going to be hitting that way. And again, our attention is focused on the model directly. Here's the front. This is where it should be. Next up, we're highlighting all of our Cygor Brown details. Now, obviously, this is not the base. That's all done. We're talking about the Spirit Seer itself. And the colour I'm using here is Deathclaw Brown. And we're doing traditional edge highlighting. So to begin with, we've got the little chain kind of rope that's holding the medallion here. Just take your time, just catch the edges. Make sure you've only got a little tip on the of paint on the brush, because you can easily just go over the details and just end up having one lump of Deathclaw Brown. So take your time there. Turning round, you've got the little rope sort of harness that's holding these two medallions, and then you've got the weapon holster and the satchel alongside it. So get those details done and we can move on to the next stage. And lastly, we've got two metallic details to highlight. So we've got the brass scorpion that I did here, and the highlight I'm using is Canoptic alloy. It's nice and simple, it's just an edge highlight alongside the lines that are the recesses. And then for all of our gold details, just a nice subtle highlight of Liberator Gold. It just buffs up that gold to give it that natural shine again, and gives it that subtle highlight that works really nicely, but helps to make the gems pop out. And I have applied this just over this. I know we didn't shade it, it just helps to enhance the gold a little bit more. Again, just a little dot on there. You've got the handle, or the butt handle of the pistol. And obviously just take your time as you go around these details, but it just adds to that shine and just finishes off the model nicely. Now at this stage, our model is what I would call parade ready. All we've got to do is the basing, but I'm not leaving it there. When we look at the box art, we've got a bit of symboling going on here, that is Aeldari, and then you've got probably what they did as a transfer on the back. I don't have a transfer, so we're going to do a bit of freehanding and take it from parade level to a more competition level. Okie dokie, starting off with our freehanding, and we've got this symbol here. Now this side is going to be smaller than this side. You've got them, it does look a bit odd, but you've got to imagine this is cracked. This area that would be small has been split wide open, so it's naturally bigger, and I'm copying exactly how the Heavy Metal team have placed their symboling. The colour I'm using here is Corax White. Now the reason for this, it is a base coat. It's going to stand out much better against this blue, but it's also an off-white. I kind of want it to look dirtier. It's going to be very different from what I do on the back, which I'll show in a second. But this dirty off-white just shows it's dirty. It kind of matches the vibe we're going for with the dirty yellow. So just take your time. Just start with a thin layer to begin with, and just build up the thickness until you're happy. Just don't overload it. If you do make a mistake, just quickly wash the brush, get rid of the paint, and try again. Remember, I'm going to add a bit to it in a minute just to make it a bit dirty, but just remember, we can absolutely grunge it up to add to that effect of it's damaged, it's broken, it was once grand, it's now ruined. Now moving on to the back, we have got this Aeldari symbol here. Now I have freehanded it on. It's a bit hard to see because it is very bright yellow, it's very bright white. The colour I'm using here is White Scar, and once again I've copied the image exactly. Now if you want to do the same, and I don't know if there is a transfer for this, but if you want to do the same, start with a triangle. Then at the top part of the triangle, you're doing a line near the top that's sort of curving like this. Do a little circle in the middle. Then you've got in the bottom half section here, draw a line that's going under like that. In the center, you've got a thicker line that goes all the way down beyond the triangle. Curve it round like the number 5 and give it a little flicky tail at the end. And you've got a line up here that's just a bit chunky going that way. Same on the other side, bit chunky going that way. It's really simple to do. Nice, quick and easy. Get that done and we'll move on to the next bit of freehanding. It's now time to finish off our model with the last bit of freehanding, and the colour I'm going for here is Caldor Sky, and we're going to match what the Heavy Metal team have done. So to begin with, let's turn it round and start with the easy part. At the end of each of these ropes, you've just got a simple horizontal line. It's on both sides, it's straightforward. The undersides are a bit harder to get to, but they're not tricky in the grand scheme of things. So just take your time, just a small amount on the tip of the brush, and get those done. Now on to the tricky bit. This patterned trim that we see on the inside of the cloak. The cloak is wavy, it's got a lot of things in the way, but it's doable. Now this is not me boasting, I did it in one attempt, 0 mistakes, and that's how simple it is if you know what you're doing. So just for guidance, let's start in this corner here where I did. Create your double diamond pattern, simple as. We've got to think of the distance between where the line is and the edge of the cloak and keep that in mind as we move along. You've got two lines going in two different directions. Remember, they're following the edge of the cloak. They're not going off at tangents, and that's going to give us a guideline of where we're moving our brush. So start at this end, and we're going up just to where my finger is there, and we're stopping. You can't get behind the cloak there. You can't see anything. That bit's done. For this bit, I'm going to put my finger here. You draw into where my finger is, and then stop. Because getting behind the leg's a bit tricky at this stage. Now what I did here is where my finger's pointing there, I've started again, drawn all the way along, up to the end. Now, moving the model to this kind of angle, I've taken the brush, and you're kind of doing dot to dot. I'm just joining up the line. You can see where it's meant to be and where it's going, and it just makes it easier. Same on this side, double diamond pattern, draw your line down, turn your model around, start drawing a line up, but this is where it's slightly different. The fold of the cloak is going just above the knee, so we're bringing that blue line all the way up very carefully to there. Once again, I started there, drew it up to there, turned it round, dot to dot. It's straightforward in that sense. It just takes time, it takes patience, it takes a lot of practice. If you do make a mistake, just a thin bit of white scar, just correct the areas rather than, getting rid of all that blue. Just touch up the mistakes you make to get a nice thin blue line like that. And with that done, our model is complete. All we need to do is add a bit of basing material, and I recommend using some grass here, some little flock grass, because a bit of greenery is going to really boost the colours that we see rather than this just dull bland base. I'm going to add a few tufts and a few flowers too, just to really show how beautiful this model is. And there we have it. Infinity's Lament is complete, and I cannot emphasize enough how perfect a model this is. There's always an army that's our least favorite to paint. It's just the way things are. But I find despite that, there's always one model that just calls to you, and it's often the perfect model. Now the Aeldari, that is my story. They're not my type of army, but this model is just brilliant. It really is. They've done an incredible job here. Now, my only criticism of this model is that it's tied to Warhammer Plus, and that's a good criticism in that it's such a great model. I want to explore different paint schemes, paint different craft worlds. I wish I could have more. I would paint more. But unfortunately, for the majority of people, we're only ever going to have one. So I've really gone to town on it, and I've really enjoyed painting it. And I hope you can see that too. Now, it was my free one for 40k, and it gets me very excited for next year's anniversary, because the quality of this model, it just means it's going to be a very good year coming. Now, if this tutorial has provided insight, inspiration and help, then do click that like button. Share so others can see and get that support too, and subscribe to see future content. Honestly, supporting me really does do something wonderful. It means I get to support you, the awesome Warhammer community, with more content like this. So until the next time, look after yourselves and happy hobbying.